Hello everyone, and welcome once again to Caleb Likes Books. Today I have another book review for you, and that is for Deep Roots by Ruthanna Emrys. This is the second book of the Innsmouth legacy duology that she wrote. I read the first book of this duology, Wintertide, in October. Found it to be kind of underwhelming, which is unfortunate because I was really excited to read this duology. I'm a big fan of H.P. Lovecraft, and I have heard many people say that the Innsmouth Legacy duology was an excellent kind of modern version of Lovecraft's mythos and things like that, like taking inspiration from his work. And so I was really looking forward to reading it, and I feel like I'm not going to have a lot to say in this review because my opinion on this book is almost exactly the same as my opinion on the first book. And to say that very briefly in kind of the way that I did in my written review on Goodreads and things like that, I am unfortunately kind of glad to be done with this book because I did not care for it. Not a bad book by any means. I think there is an appeal to it. I just don't think that it worked for me, and is not something that I particularly cared for. But to talk first about some good things about this book, of which there are things, I think it primarily falls on the world building front. I still do believe that this book and this duology in general does a great job with its world building. I really enjoy the way that this book plays with Lovecraft's Cthulhu mythos. You get a little bit more expanded on it in this book. The kind of premise of this series is that the series follows a main character who is a resident or past resident of Innsmouth, and so she's like a human Deep One hybrid, which is interesting. And so you get a lot of stuff to do with the mythos from that angle of a character who is a part of it directly, and also a character who is religiously involved with the mythos, so she directly worships and prays to, characters such as, Cthulhu and Nyarlathotep and Dagon and all these things like that. And so that is very interesting. I also like the way that this book expands on the world building. You get the presence of things like the Migo. You get to see like the Dreamlands, things like that. It expands on the mythos elements in interesting ways and inventive ways, and I did enjoy getting some of that. I also still do think like the writing style here is really good. I enjoy the writing style. I think it's a very well written book and things like that. But like I said, don't have a lot to say about this book. I still did not particularly care for this book. I still found it rather boring. Things happened and none of it really stuck with me. There were plenty of characters, talking to each other, interacting with one another, but I found really none of them all that compelling except for Afra herself, who's the protagonist. And mostly I just find her interesting because she's the main POV character. And there is interesting stuff going on here. So you have like humans interacting with the Deep One hybrids, interacting with the Migo, which makes for some kind of interesting dynamics, but didn't really do much for me in that sense either. And in general, this book just, it had stuff going on that probably might have been interesting if, some people might read this and think it's interesting and enjoyable and all these kinds of things. I personally just found it kind of boring. It didn't really hook me in any way. The first book, I think, had an interesting premise. I think kind of the initial premise of this one is also interesting, of kind of trying to restore Innsmouth and get people to come back and things like that. So I think that side of it was interesting, but I never really felt like I was getting a lot of real progression in that. And I'm sure, it probably was there, but it just didn't stick with me. It didn't really resonate with me. I didn't really enjoy reading it. It just, to me, was very boring almost all the way throughout. And there were times where I enjoyed it, where there was some interesting world building things, like when the Migo showed up and when the Dreamland showed up and all these things. Thought that was really cool. I was like, oh, that's kind of exciting. And there was some interesting things done with that. But for the most part, this book just really did not work for me. Again, not that it's bad. It's a very well-written book. I'm sure that it will appeal to a certain kind of reader. And just the fact that so many people who are into Lovecraft and things like that do like this duology, I think is a testament to that. Like, this is a duology that I would still encourage people to read because it does do some very interesting things with Lovecraft's work, and it's, a well-written duology and things like that. I just don't think that it was very compelling to me and very, very appealing to me particularly, which is unfortunate because I was really excited to read this duology, but I figured I at least tried it out. You know, it was worth reading because it did do some cool things that I hadn't really seen before, especially with the way that it handled the Cthulhu mythos, but in general, it just did not really grab me all that much, didn't really compel me. And so as far as a rating out of 10 that I'd give Deep Roots, I'd give it like a 5 out of 10, which I feel like is a little harsh. I probably would say I liked it about the same level as the first book, which I think I gave a 6. But if I had not been committed to finishing this duology, I figured, you know, it's 2 books. I can read 2 books, no problem. And, you know, by the time I was thinking about this, I was only halfway through. I was like, this is a short book. It's only 350 pages. I can get through the whole thing. If I had not really committed to reading the entire duology and finishing this book, I probably would have DNF'd it because I just did not care. And I was just very bored and wanting to move on to the next thing, which is unfortunate. But, you know, at least I gave it a try. At least I read it, and I gave it a good, honest try, and I'm happy with that, I suppose. Who knows, maybe Ruthanna Emrys will do something else someday that maybe I'll enjoy more. Definitely, you know, this author, I think, is one where the concepts and the ideas that she came up with in this duology were such that I would be interested in reading more from her, because I think there's the possibility that she could write something that I would really enjoy, but unfortunately, this duology wasn't it. So that's pretty much it for my review. Let me know in the comments if you have read Deep Roots and the duology in general. If you've read this book, I assume you've read the first one. Let me know what you thought of it, if you enjoyed it, if you didn't really care for it, kind of like myself, if you're interested in reading it, any of that stuff, let me know in the comments. So that is pretty much it for this video. So thank you all for watching, and I will see you all next time.